Good morning. Today we are going to be talking about opposites and absolute value. But first, can you tell me why the rabbit crossed the road? To prove he wasn't a chicken. So, let's get right into this very brief little lecture that we're doing, opposites and absolute value. You'll notice that I've already plotted the point 3 on this number line. And we have the origin of the number line. We have our arrows on both sides of this number line indicating that the line extends forever in the positive direction and it extends forever in the negative direction. Now let's see how many units, how many spaces we are from 3 until we get to 0. Well, there's 1 plus 1 plus 1. We have 3 spaces, 3 units until we get to 0. So we are 3 units from 0. Let's go ahead and find what number on the number line we locate if we move 3 units to the left of 0. Because here we have 1, 2, 3 units to the right of 0. Let's see what we have when we move 1, 2, whoops, 1 plus 1, and another number, another unit to the left of 0. 1 unit plus 1 unit plus 1 unit to the left of 0 is 3. Let's plot this point. We don't have a 3, but we rather have a negative 3. Same distance from 0, 3 units from 0, but we have opposite signs. We have a negative 3 on the left. We have a positive 3 on the right. Opposite numbers are also called additive inverses. And I know you thought, oh good, this is a math class, I don't have vocabulary. Well, you've got vocabulary. You have to know the language of math to be able to succeed in math. So just suck it up and learn that an additive inverse is the same as an opposite. What additive numbers are is that those numbers on the number line, they're the same distance from 0, but they have different signs, negative 3 and positive 3. And always when you take an additive in a number, add its additive inverse, you're always going to end up back at 0, whether you have negative 3 and a positive 3, negative 2010, positive 2010, negative 0.8765, positive 0.8765, negative 2/3, positive 2/3. As long as the only way that those two numbers differ is in their sign, they are opposites or they're additive inverses. Opposites tells us that they're the same, that they're equally distant from 0 on the number line, but that their signs are different and that when you add them together, no matter how big the numbers, how small the numbers, how strange they look, negative pi divided by 3, positive pi divided by 3, as long as they only differ with their signs, when you add them together, it's always 0. And that's what opposites or additive inverses are. Now, we're going to talk about absolute value. And a lot of time people do not like this idea of absolute value because it's a funny word that you have, not familiar with what it means. You see something and I say, okay, this is the absolute value of a negative 4. And that's the same as the absolute value of a positive 4. And you say, come on, Miss Weibel, it doesn't make any sense. First off, what are those weird sticks there? And second, how can a negative number and a positive number be the same? Because they're not. Okay? You're right. A negative number and positive number, they're opposites. You add them together and you get 0 as long as it's negative 4, positive 4. Absolute values of numbers, however, of absolute value of negative, absolute value of positive, they have the same value. And when you have these two long sticks standing outside of it, that's the symbol that's read, the absolute value of whatever's inside. And what absolute value is it's not a number so much, but it's distance. And this will mean a lot to those of you who are driving or to your parents. But let's think about it. Let's say that you've just gotten your driver's license and mom and dad are going to let you drive to the local hamburger joint. But the key is that whenever you use that car, you have to pay for the gas inside it. Reasonable. Mom and dad are paying the insurance, which is a lot more than the gas is. So let's say that your home is here. Here's your house, right here. You know, chimney coming out. Since it's wintertime, there's smoke in the chimney. You're going to go down to the burger joint with your friends. But there's a new burger joint in town that you just have to go to, Johnny's Burgers. And it's over here. Let's say that this represents Johnny's Burger Joint. And it has sesame seed bun. And you want to go to Johnny's Burger Joint, and it's really worth it to you. But my goodness, you live in a big metroplex. So Johnny's Burger Joint is 20 miles away. So you get in your trusty little car, you drive to Johnny's Burger Joint, 20 miles, and then when you come home, you have to drive 20 miles back. So how far have you actually driven? Well, you've driven 20 miles there, 20 miles back, so you've driven 40 miles. You know, maybe you have to buy two gallons of gas. You have to pay $7 or $8 for the gas to go get your burger. And let's think about the number line here. Let's say that we have this number line here, and you've started at 0, and here's 20. So you drove there, and then you turned around and came back. Well, you started at 0 with your car, you went out 20 miles, turned around and came back in the opposite direction. You didn't end up at 40, did you? No, you didn't go to Johnny's and then go 20 miles further away. You ended up back at 0. So how is it that you put 40 miles on your car, but if you use this thing here on the number line, it looks like you didn't do anything, like you didn't get any distance? Well, what it is that when we talk about absolute value, we're not talking about positives and negatives, because you could think of this as you went plus 20 miles to go to the hamburger place, you went minus 20 miles to get back home. So with numbers, those would be opposites, right? 20 and negative 20, and they cancel each other out. So you get a 0. You add them together, 20 plus a negative 20 is 0. But you know that even though if you add a 20 and a negative 20, you still ended up going 40 miles. 20 plus 20 is equal to 40 miles that you covered, and that's what absolute value is. Absolute value is the distance from 0 on the number line. So, let me write that down while you chew on that for a minute. Chew on the hamburger, chew on the definition of absolute value. I said that absolute value is the distance from 0. Distance from 0 on the number line. On the number line is what absolute value is. So let's look at the number line here. I'm going to have my 0 here. I'm going to have a positive 20 here. And I'm going to have a negative 20 here. How far is it from 0 to 20? Well, it's 20 units, isn't it? Units. And how far is it from 0 to a negative 20? Well, that's 20 units as well. With absolute value, it doesn't matter if you're moving in a positive direction or if you're moving in a negative direction from 0. Because we're talking about distance, absolute value is always positive. Distance is always positive. When you guys go on a long trip, you drive to the mountains and it's 750 miles. And when you come back home from the mountains, your odometer on your car says that you've driven 1,500 miles, not that you've driven 0 miles. We'd love it if that's how it happened, because then our cars would last forever. But it's not. It's the distance traveled is what absolute value is. So what that means is that absolute value is always positive. Absolute value is always positive. So if we say, what is the absolute value of 4? Well, it's a positive 4, isn't it? We're going to graph here a 4 and a negative 4. And then they ask you, they say, okay, what is the absolute value of a negative 4? In other words, how many units from 0 is negative 4? Well, the distance from 0 of negative 4 is also a negative 4. And that's all that's involved in finding absolute value. If it's a negative number, it's the opposite of what's inside the parentheses. The opposite of a negative 1 is a positive 1. If it's a positive number, it's that number itself. Okay? Remember, absolute value is always positive. Absolute value refers to how far a number is located from 0 on the number line. In other words, it's just distance from 0. There's only one other thing that you need to remember when you're working with absolute value, and that is the absolute value bars function just the same as parentheses do. Let's say, how do we find the absolute value of negative 4 plus 9? You remember, with absolute value, one way to remember it is PEMDAS, or pretty please, my dear Aunt Sally. These are little expressions that help us to remember order of operation. Parentheses and exponential expressions first, multiplication and division next, addition and subtraction our third priority. PPMDS, pretty please, my dear Aunt Sally. This says parentheses and powers, which are the same as exponents. Multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. Absolute value bars count as parentheses. That means you have to do what's inside the absolute value bars first. So negative 4 plus 9 is 5. So then you can say that the absolute value of 5 is a positive 5. If you have the absolute value of 9 plus 3, we wanted to calculate that. Negative 9 plus 3 is a negative 6, isn't it? Let me see if that's showing. Yes, that's showing. So what's the absolute value of negative 6? That's a positive 6. So let's go back and do these two problems incorrectly. If you think, okay, the absolute value of negative 4 is a positive 4. The absolute value of 9 is 9. Then you're going to say 13 is the answer, aren't you? But that's wrong. If you take the absolute value of negative 9, that's 9. The absolute value of a positive 3 is 3. You would say that answer is 12, which is also wrong. Now you see that we've gotten different answers, and these are the correct answers because order of operation is important. And it's not only important, it's essential. You have to complete whatever the problem is inside the absolute value bars before you can take its absolute value. Let's do just one more brief, simple one showing multiplication. Let's say that we have negative 3 times 5. We want to find that absolute value. We want to find the absolute value of 3 times the negative 5. We want to find the absolute value of 3 times 5. And finally, we want to find the absolute value of negative 3 times a negative 5. Look at that for a second. Do you see that the answer to all of these is a positive 15? You don't? Well, let's look at it. You have to do what's inside the parentheses first. Negative 3 times negative 5 is a negative 15 that we want to find the absolute value of. Absolute value is always positive. Absolute value of negative 15 is 15. 3 times a negative 5, once again you have the absolute value of a negative 15, which is 15. 3 times 5, that's simple. Absolute value of a positive number is the number itself. Negative 3 times negative 5 is a positive 15. Then you take the absolute value, which is a 15. So you see here that regardless of if you have a negative number that you're taking an absolute value of, or a positive number, that the absolute value is going to be positive. When you have a negative number, its absolute value is its opposite. When you have a positive number, its absolute value is that same value itself. And thanks a lot for watching.